At 2:17 a.m., something happened that most of the world slept through, but military analysts didn't. A single Ukrainian drone slipped through layers of Russian defenses and slammed into one of the most critical oil facilities in Crimea. Within minutes, flames were rising into the sky, visible from miles away. Satellite systems detected the fire almost instantly. Russian infrastructure, once thought to be untouchable in the region, was burning. And this wasn't just another strike. This was a message. Because what's unfolding right now in the Russia-Ukraine war is no longer just a battlefield conflict. It's something much bigger, much darker, and far more dangerous than most people realize. Ukraine isn't just fighting Russia anymore. It's exposing Russia's weaknesses, one strike at a time. And at the same time, Russia isn't just fighting Ukraine. It's quietly expanding the war beyond Ukraine's borders, into Europe, into NATO territory, and into a shadow battlefield most people don't even see. This is where things start to get dangerous. Because while missiles and drones dominate headlines, a second war is unfolding in silence. A war of sabotage, a war of infiltration, a war designed to weaken entire nations from the inside out. And it's already happening. But before we get there, you need to understand what's happening on the ground, because that's where the real story begins. Over the past few months, Ukraine has shifted its strategy, and the results are impossible to ignore. Instead of focusing only on frontline battles, Ukraine is now targeting something far more critical: Russia's ability to sustain the war. Oil facilities, supply chains, logistics hubs, and one by one, they're taking them out. The strike on the Crimean oil base wasn't the first. It wasn't even the second. It was the third major hit on the same facility. Each time, more damage. Each time, fewer resources left. Each time, Russia gets weaker. Satellite images show what's left: charred tanks, destroyed storage units, and only a handful of usable reserves. What used to be one of Russia's largest oil storage hubs in Crimea is now barely functional. And here's why that matters. War isn't just about soldiers, it's about fuel. Without fuel, tanks don't move, jets don't fly, ships don't deploy, and supply lines collapse. Ukraine knows this, and they're exploiting it perfectly. But it doesn't stop there. In a separate operation, Ukrainian forces targeted something even more critical: a ferry used to transport railway fuel shipments. This wasn't just any ferry. It was one of the last operational routes Russia had to move large quantities of fuel and equipment into key areas. And now, it's gone. Destroyed by drone strikes, left burning and unusable. And just like that, another piece of Russia's logistics network disappears. This is not random. This is systematic dismantling. Every strike is calculated. Every target is chosen for maximum impact. And slowly, Russia is being pushed into a position it cannot sustain. But here's where things take a turn. Because while Ukraine is becoming more precise, more efficient, and more aggressive, Russia is changing its strategy too. And not in a way that makes the world safer. Because instead of focusing only on Ukraine, Russia is expanding the battlefield. Not with tanks, not with troops, but with something far more difficult to detect and far harder to stop: hybrid warfare. And if you think that sounds complicated, let's break it down. This is not traditional war. There are no official declarations, no clear front lines, no obvious attacks. Instead, it's a mix of tactics designed to destabilize entire countries without triggering a direct military response. Cyber attacks, sabotage operations, drone incursions, underwater infrastructure threats, and psychological warfare, all happening at once. And Europe is already feeling it. There have been multiple incidents, some confirmed, others quietly brushed aside. Drones entering NATO airspace, critical infrastructure being targeted, energy systems disrupted, communication cables damaged. And each time, there's just enough uncertainty to avoid a full-scale response. Because that's the strategy. Push the limit, but never cross the line. Officially. At least not yet. And here's the terrifying part. It's working. Because while Ukraine is fighting a visible war, Europe is dealing with an invisible one. A shadow war. And most people don't even realize it's happening. But some countries are starting to wake up. Eastern Europe in particular is no longer ignoring the signs. They're strengthening defenses, forming alliances, preparing for something bigger. Because they understand what this really is. It's not just pressure, it's preparation. Preparation for a larger conflict. And if that sounds extreme, ask yourself this. Why are drones suddenly appearing in NATO airspace? Why are undersea cables being targeted? Why are multiple countries increasing military cooperation at the same time? This isn't coincidence. This is escalation. Controlled, but deliberate. And right now, the world is sitting in a very dangerous position. Because on one side, Ukraine is gaining momentum, damaging Russia's ability to continue the war. But on the other side, Russia is expanding the conflict in ways that could pull in multiple countries. And if that happens, this stops being a regional war and starts becoming something global. But we're not there yet, not officially. For now, everything is still just below the threshold, just enough to avoid triggering a full-scale response, just enough to keep the world guessing. But that balance is getting harder to maintain. Because every drone strike, every sabotage operation, every escalation pushes things one step closer to the edge. And in part 2, we're going deeper, into the shadow war, into the alliances being formed behind the scenes, and into the real question no one is asking. What happens if Russia decides to stop playing in the shadows and steps into the light? If you think this situation can't get worse, you're not paying attention. Make sure you subscribe right now, because what's coming next, most channels won't even talk about. What if everything you've seen so far is only the surface? Because while the world is focused on burning oil depots and drone strikes in Crimea, something far more dangerous is unfolding behind the scenes. Something that doesn't make headlines as often, but has the potential to drag entire continents into conflict. This is the shadow war, and it's accelerating. Right now, across Europe, governments are quietly preparing for scenarios they don't publicly discuss. Not because they want to hide the truth, but because the truth is uncomfortable. Russia is no longer just testing Ukraine. It's testing NATO. Step by step, line by line. And every time it pushes forward without consequences, it learns something valuable. How far it can go before the world reacts. Take the recent pattern of drone incursions. These aren't accidents. These are probes. Drones entering NATO airspace, lingering just long enough to trigger alarms, but not long enough to justify retaliation. It's psychological warfare, a way to create tension without triggering war. And it's working. Because each incident forces countries to respond, but in controlled, limited ways. Airports shut down. Jets scrambled. Air defenses activated. But no missiles fired back. No escalation. Just reaction. And that's exactly what Russia wants. Because this isn't about one drone. It's about testing the system, finding weaknesses, mapping response times, understanding coordination between NATO countries. And once that data is collected, it can be used. But drones are just one part of it. The real danger lies deeper, under the ocean, beneath the surface, where thousands of kilometers of cables carry the world's internet, financial transactions, and military communications. There have been multiple cases of damage, pipelines disrupted, undersea cables cut, and in many cases, no clear culprit, just suspicion and silence. Because proving responsibility in these situations is nearly impossible. And that's the brilliance of hybrid warfare. You can attack without being officially blamed. You can weaken your enemy without triggering retaliation. And you can deny everything. Meanwhile, the damage is already done. But here's where things start to shift. Because Europe is no longer ignoring these signals. Countries like Poland, the Baltic states, and even smaller nations like Bulgaria are taking this seriously. Very seriously. Military budgets are increasing. Defense systems are being upgraded. Joint operations are expanding. And perhaps most importantly, alliances are strengthening. Not just politically, but operationally. We're now seeing deeper cooperation between European nations and Ukraine. Shared intelligence, joint production of military technology, and a focus on one specific area: drones. Because Ukraine has become one of the most advanced drone warfare forces in the world. They've learned fast, adapted faster, and turned low-cost technology into high-impact weapons. Thousands of drones, swarm tactics, precision strikes. And now, that knowledge is spreading to Europe, which means the next phase of this conflict won't just be fought by Ukraine. It could involve multiple nations, all equipped with similar capabilities. And that changes everything. Because once that happens, the line between supporting Ukraine and being part of the war becomes dangerously thin. And Russia knows this, which is why it's trying to disrupt that process. Through cyber attacks, through misinformation, through internal division. Because if there's one thing that can weaken NATO, it's not military force. It's disagreement, division, confusion. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Political tensions rising within European countries. Debates over funding. Disagreements over strategy. Public opinion being influenced by coordinated online campaigns. This isn't random. This is targeted. Because a divided alliance is easier to challenge than a united one. And Russia is betting on that. But here's the problem. That strategy only works for so long, because eventually, there's a breaking point. A moment where the line is crossed too clearly, too visibly, too aggressively. And when that happens, there's no more ambiguity, no more deniability, only response. And the question is, how close are we to that moment? Some military experts believe we're already closer than most people think. Warnings are coming from intelligence agencies, from defense officials, from analysts who track these patterns daily. They're all saying the same thing. This is escalating, not suddenly, but steadily. And the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to control. Because escalation doesn't need to be intentional. Sometimes, all it takes is one mistake, one miscalculation, one drone that goes too far, one attack that hits the wrong target. And suddenly, everything changes. That's how larger wars begin, not always with a decision, but with a moment. And right now, the conditions for that moment are building. Ukraine is hitting deeper into Russian infrastructure. Russia is expanding its hybrid operations across Europe. NATO is increasing its readiness. And alliances are tightening. Each side preparing. Each side watching. Each side waiting. And in the middle of it all, a balance that's becoming harder to maintain. Because pressure is building on every front. Military, political, technological, and psychological. So the real question isn't whether this conflict will continue. It will. The real question is, will it stay contained? Or will it spill over into something much bigger? Because history has shown us something very clearly. Conflicts like this don't stay limited forever. And when they expand fast. Faster than most people expect. So while the world watches explosions on the battlefield, the real story is unfolding in the shadows. In decisions being made behind closed doors. In strategies that aren't announced. In moves that don't make headlines until it's too late. And by the time everyone realizes what's happening, the situation may already be out of control. If you want to stay ahead of what's really happening, not just what's being reported, make sure you subscribe right now. Because this isn't just another war update. This is a situation that's evolving in real time. And the next phase could change everything.